Okay,
Thank you.
bye. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful session on advertising trends and linear television. From linear, we move to non-linear, and coming up now is a special feature, embracing non-linearity, our formula for creativity and competitiveness. We have with us in this session a very esteemed set of panelists. The session is going to be moderated by Mr. Vivan Sharan. He is advisor of Asia Center and partner at Kuan Advisory Group. Welcome, Vivan. The panelists we have with us the panelist Ms. Vani Tripathi Tikku, member of Central Board of Film Certification. Vani is also an actor and producer. We have with us Mr. Prahlad Kakkar, founder of Genesis Film Production, and Mr. Gaurav Banerjee, president of Hindi Entertainment Star India Private Limited. Before I invite all the panelists and before I hand over the podium to Vivan, I would like to share with our viewers that in this section we have a release of a very special report, which is titled Embracing Non-Linearity, the Future of India's Entertainment Industry. This report has been authored by Mr. Shekhar Kapoor, President of Central Board of Film Certification, and Ms. Vani Tripathi Tikku. They are both the authors of this very colorful and wonderful report, which you can see some of the slides we are sharing here on the screen with you. We are very honored to have the launch of this report here. And I now request Mr. Vivan Sharan to take over the podium from here.
Thank you. Just a minor correction that Shekhar ji is president for FTII. Vani ji, of course, we all know as member of CBFC. And the report was published by the Asia Center, which is an innovation-centric think tank based in New Delhi. And many of the things that we've discussed in the report pertain to a long-term vision for India's media and entertainment industries. Because bereft of a long-term vision, many of us would be adrift in terms of how we work towards a common future where consumers and markets are served well. So with that very brief introduction, I want to dive right into this exciting panel and mention at the outset that, when Gutenberg began experimenting with the printing press in France in 1440, it took him about 10 years to ready the printing press for commercial use. But it took another 100 years for that printing press to come to India via Portuguese missionaries, in fact, and through Goa. And it took perhaps another 200 years for the initial wave was basically for Jesuit priests to share printed facts on their religion. But it took another 200 years or so, and the first armed struggle for independence in 1857, after which there was a sudden realization in India about the importance of the printed word for the common man. And only print at that stage could help exchange of ideas between different communities and different parts of the country. The British, of course, had their own interest in proffering and mainstreaming the printing press, which included, of course, promotion of education in the country, particularly to train a large segment of administrators we have come to fondly call the white-collared babus. But what we are witnessing today in terms of technological evolution is nothing short of a revolution brought about by digitization. It's similar to the revolution of the printing press, except that the timeline clearly has been shortened and adoption is coterminous with the rest of the world. Our local creative industries are already able to leverage these frontier digital technologies, ranging from artificial intelligence to OTT, as we have come to be familiar with throughout the course of this conference. And therefore, the key to global competitiveness of India's industry perhaps is twofold. And we'll discuss this with the panelists. How should we project our rich heritage of stories and content and creativity through this new technology? And how should we tell new stories that are tailored to the evolution of this technology? And each layer of digital, whether it is the content layer, the device layer, or even the network layer. So with that, I'll read out an excerpt from the report and turn to Ms. Vani Tripathi Tikku for her introductory thoughts on this paper. I quote, ma'am, advances in AI, gaming, AR, VR have ushered in an era of immersive storytelling, where the audience is transported into the story world as an active participant. Here, while elements of the story are given definition in ways similar to film, the narrative itself depends on the actions and decisions of the consumer. So, given this context, I think we all agree with this. How should we actually change the way in which we write scripts and tell stories? How do we leverage our cultural heritage while we do that?
Thank you, Vivan. And thank you, CII, for giving us this opportunity to launch this report, which has taken a whole year of work with Shekhar, me, and Vivan and the SS Center boys. Nice to see Prahlad, beaming Prahlad as usual. Lovely to see you with us on the panel. And a rare sight, Gaurav Banerjee. Hi, Gaurav. Interesting to see you here. I do get to share a lot of space with Netflix and some of the other OTT platforms often, but it's good that we have Hotstar and Gaurav with us today. So, you see, Vivan, the question that you've asked is exactly the epicenter of the change that we need to be. Also, look at the dystopia. We are all meeting virtually. We are not meeting at the CII Big Picture this time physically in New Delhi or in any other part of the world. We are here looking at storytelling, which has become an escalated reality in this COVID time. I won't still call it post-COVID. We are right in the middle of it. But as far as immersive storytelling, this is one word that we use often in the report. It is the same immersiveness that the stories we grew up with, Vivan. The stories of the Mahabharata and the Ramayana and the Jataka tales, the story of the various folk fables that, when we were children, we were, used to be listening to. The fact that today gaming is such a big industry and the immersive part of the storytelling is shifting to augmented reality and to gaming. Apparently, big companies write very specific screenplays for these games. India is in an advantage here that we argue in the report. We are a land of Kathavachaks. We are a land of storytellers. Every nook and corner is a story as far as this country is concerned. I think it's time to not negotiate the writing space. It's first time to negotiate the thinking space. If we will start thinking the nuance of the country that we are, this great nation of storytellers, I think that itself will become the insignia of this immersive part of storytelling, which is emerging so fast. I don't think we want to be disadvantaged to the extent that technology catches up and we get lagged behind. The fact that we have so many stories, we don't have to rummage through a Pandora's box and try and scratch our heads and think, oh, what is the next story that we want to tell? We are full of stories in this land. The diversity of this country and the various linguistic storytelling realities is something that we should be catering to, we should be offering to each other. And I would reach out to my OTT platform friends here. Content is not created on a table and on a write pad. Content is created in the mind. The immersive part of content is right here. The fact that we are able to tap it, it's a pushed ecosystem. COVID has given us this kind of a advantage where we can write more and more stories and produce more and more stories at a much easier pace in this very virtual land that we are faced with. I think this is a great advantage for us right now, and also tomorrow you and I will be in Kurukshetra, a wheel within a wheel within a wheel, a story within a story within a story. You will be Karn, I would be Krishna, somebody else will be Vidur. And probably that screenplay wouldn't end according to the story that we know as Mahabharata. It will end according to your mind and mine. So thoughts are going to take over. I mean, this was a distant reality just a decade ago. it's a completely changed scenario. So if we are to immerse ourselves in the immersiveness of storytelling, the time is now. I think we have to start, be quick on our feet, and we have to start thinking in that direction before we are faced with a situation where somebody else patents our stories, starts writing for us, and we will be scratching our heads again and saying, oh God, this belonged to us and has gone elsewhere.
Prahlad, if I can bring you in on this point,
Yes.
because something we've discussed before, and it still troubles me, that India really lags behind in commercialization and monetization of its creative works and products and intellectual property. While we produce many, many more films than the US and perhaps US and China combined, what we see in the content industry is a caricature of many other industries where we somehow are not able to capture commensurate value. And that value capture, if you look at advanced markets, happens through the unbundling of this innovation into multiple forms. And I just want you to speak to this, how do we reimagine things like merchandising in the context of the technological evolution accompanying storytelling today?
See, Vivan, India as a country is unique because whatever model of pharma fits anybody else, you have to tweak it and re-look at it if it's going to be relevant to this country. For one thing, it's not really one country. It's every state is a country. Every 100 miles that you go, cuisine changes, language changes, nuances of language change, and so forth and so on. So what is it that actually brings the country together in terms of a single platform? And one is cricket and the other is movies of any kind or entertainment for that matter. Now, OTT, issues. Now, the main issue about what Vani was talking about, first, let me just touch on that, which is that we as an industry have never given importance to the storyteller. That means the writer of stories. We've always given importance to the star who's actually acting out the stories. Because it was so easy to plagiarize before intellectual property laws actually came into being in this country. We were very late on the bandwagon. As a matter of fact, China, who did it deliberately, we did it because there was no real way of persecuting somebody who had stolen somebody's idea. And it was always a tutu meme. So what happened was it was so easy to steal that you would not pay the guy who was doing an original creation. He said, "Ye to chalta hai yaar, ye to pehle bhi kiya hai. Let's steal it. Let's not try and reinvent the wheel." Okay. So the storyteller was always subdued. He was the least paid. He was the most overworked person within our industry. Today, for the first time, the storyteller is actually getting recognition. And that's a great thing because the storyteller getting recognition means that a lot of stories are going to come out of the box. And a lot of old stories which we've grown up with as children, because every child of any generation, instead of watching cartoon channel, the best form of education he's ever got is being told stories at sleeping time. So that he was put to sleep listening to the Ramayana or the Mahabharata or whatever else it is, and chapter by chapter. And the next time, and he'd look forward to sleeping the next day because he'd get another segment of the story. Now, people like Shyam Benegal actually made modern films based on the Mahabharata, which was two business families at war with each other in terms of a commercial thing. And it was relatively successful because the format of the pharma was already set for him. So it took very little to adapt that to the modern milieu and to look at it in terms of, instead of fighting with each other in terms of bloodshed, to fight with each other on the economic field and in terms of industrial families and rivalries of that kind. Now, when it comes to monetization of verticals like merchandising, in India, it doesn't work the way it works in the West because for some obscure reason, our fan base, except in the south of this country, is not so fanatical that they will buy any T-shirt with the guy's face on it. So therefore, when movies create characters and those characters become larger than life, there is no fanatical following where you have a cheap T-shirt for $200 with a guy's face on it and people will just rush and buy it. Bullshit. They will buy the T-shirt because it's $200, not because there's somebody's face on it. So if you want to charge 1,200 rupees for a T-shirt, which you can get for 200 or 300 rupees on the rasa, then it had better offer you a quality which other competitors, especially the rasa competitors, cannot compete with. So it's not that, just the fan belt will actually go for somebody's face or some character that you created in the movies. You have to actually create a whole set of new products which have value in themselves because they're damn good quality value, which you can only get in this country. For instance, like leather goods. Leather is relatively cheap in this country. If you turn around and really put brand names of characters from movies or fictional characters, and you launch a range of wallets or handbags or whatever else that you have under that range, and if you had to buy that product, regardless of the branding, it would cost you the same amount. Then you would buy it for its quality. The branding comes secondly. Over a period of time, the brand would overtake the intrinsic quality of the thing because of trust. What is branding? It's all about trust. You trust in a name because you realize that every single time you'll get the same quality, or they'll take the product back if you complain about it. That is a relationship. That is an ongoing relationship. But merchandising in the country is a quicksand, because just by putting somebody's face or somebody's name on a T-shirt or on a commodity which you're trying to sell doesn't work, because the only one that really worked initially was Shah Rukh's cricket team, where they designed their costumes and the helmets and everything initially for merchandising, because you realized that there was a lot of money in merchandising which they were missing the boat for. So the first year, his merchandising did really well. After that, because the quality dropped, it tapered off.
We'll come back to this, and obviously we will have to reimagine the forms that merchandising takes with technology. You may have AR and VR headsets that are unique to a particular piece of content, or
not only that. According to Vani's report, the beautiful part of it is that it's an open-ended story.
Absolutely.
You can decide on who wins and who loses depending on your expertise on actually manipulating the story yourself. So every viewer has the control over which direction the story takes on the button, just like you do in gaming. So why do you think the entire Gen Next is hooked onto gaming in such a way? Because they feel that they are in control of their own destiny, that somebody else is not dictating to them what they must watch or what they must see. That is not predetermined. That they can actually change the content to that extent that you can win, lose, get killed, kill, or solve a murder mystery or do whatever else you want, but you pay the detective. Not
Raji, you provided a perfect segue, because you've spoken of choice here, the consumer being central, and I think this is one of the things that has come to define the OTT age over the last decade in India. And today we have over 600 hours of original OTT content, which is 33% higher in 2019 than the previous year. This is created by Indians, for Indians, in local languages, high production value, savvy packaging and delivery, and so on. And what really gives us some encouragement is that, unlike many countries in, say, Europe or Canada, this has happened despite strong cultural protections. We've had a domestic evolution of OTT out of linear television dominated media and entertainment industry. And Gaurav sits somewhere in the middle with one foot in each boat, and it's a precarious balancing act, Gaurav, particularly in cold and choppy waters. But clearly the industry has had a lot of early movers, and therefore we obviously did something right to adopt and adapt from television, because out of the 40 or 50 OTT platforms today in India, only a handful are foreign platforms, and over half of the domestic platforms are erstwhile broadcasters or continue to be broadcasting in linear TV market. So what are we doing right, which we did in the linear TV world and extrapolated to this world? And what possibly equally may we be doing wrong that we need to be cognizant of?
Thank you, Vivan. And it's an amazing opportunity today here for me to be with Prahlad, Vani, and you having this conversation. So thank you for having me on it. And yeah, I think, when you look back on Indian media, we can't really think of many areas in which we can claim that the Indian market has taken a big leap, which is ahead of the curve. Right? I think there are a lot of trends where we tend to follow, but this leap into digital, and particularly for what we would call traditional media companies in India, has been unprecedented, and we have truly been ahead of the curve. So if you think about my company, Star, I think we made the move to digital in 2015 with Hotstar. And I think many established big global media companies are only following through now. So that's a 5-year head start, which is a great opportunity that we should truly build from. And this is not just my company, I think it's other companies in India as well. I also feel that the opportunity for us in India now is just beginning to get even more exciting. So if you think about it again, 2015-16, when we launched Hotstar, in India, we had about 200 million screens where people could watch stories. Today, that number is 700 million, right? In another couple of years, it'll be a billion. So we would have taken in 5 to 6 years an opportunity of hitting screens of 200 million with storytelling to a billion screens. I think the second thing, which is really amazing, is how we have got quality and variety going. So again, if I were to give you another data point, in 2016, when I was commissioning drama in Hindi, the average cost of an episode was roughly $10,000. That remains for a large part of the country. It's equally true today also. But there are at least 10 shows, maybe more, that are being produced at $1 million an episode, right? So we've gone from $10,000 to $1 million. The third change, which is the biggest change, is that in 2016, I was one among 4 people commissioning big ticket series in Mumbai, one among 4. Today, I'm one among 40, and I'm not counting YouTube, right? So it's a massive explosion of platforms, of money and budgets, and all of it fueled by a massive explosion of screens, and therefore massive, screen time, entertainment that needs to get created. I think the second thing that is happening, and some of this is there in Vani in your report, we are changing how we are making stories and reaching consumers in a very big way. The fundamentals of how we do, run our business today are all different from what they used to be just 4 years ago, right? Let me begin by talking to you about the first experience that any viewer has with a story, which is communication. Someone like Prahlad makes an ad, right? Now, the way that that ad is showcased today is fundamentally different. It is because we know who you are, we know what you watch, and therefore the facet of that ad, the image, the person, what we will show, all of that will be different and will be determined by who we believe you are, right? So this itself is a huge change. I think the second change, which is equally massive, is how do we respond to content? How do we understand, how content is being received? And digital listening is a massive feature that everybody is spending, money and getting the technology right to be able to do that much better. And that ability to listen and figure out data is a massive plugin to writers, right? Which is real time. It's much more detailed. So, I have been in television and in content for all my life, 20 years, right? Now, in the past, what would I do? Or what would a lot of clients tell Prahlad? That, boss, we did some focus groups. We met 10, 15 consumers here and 10, 15 consumers there. Now, that response can be so much more scientific and so much wider, right? And digital allows us to get that. So we get lots of depth, we get the right people, and we get it much faster. And all of that makes storytelling, therefore, much richer potentially, right? So we're changing how we communicate. We are changing who we get to. We're changing listening and therefore feedback right? Making that much richer. Finally, we're changing production, right? So Disney Plus has put out this beautiful show called Mandalorian. It looks literally out of the world. And one of the big reasons why it looks out of the world is because Lucasfilm has developed something called Stagecraft, where they are virtually creating the worlds for the actors. And therefore, they are not imagining what it might be like on green screens, right? And therefore, the emotion and the way it is getting captured is fundamentally different. Was not possible to do that again in 2016. So there is a huge and massive way in which technology and storytelling is coming together, becoming one, that truly has not happened and is happening now every day in every big story that is being told today. And here it is something which is truly fundamental and huge. But one big piece of area which requires work, and I'll build on something that Prahlad said, is that we must remain true to the fundamentals, which is essentially storytelling. And how do we improve that? And I feel that one opportunity, of course, is that we need to recognize original writing and we need to pay better. That honestly in television has never been that much of a problem. I know in films the world is different, but most good TV shows account for at least 8 to 10% of their overall budgets to writing alone. So on that, on money, we're kind of doing okay. But on quality, we can do a lot better. And I think the challenge with quality in India is that we are not investing enough, or we need to invest a lot more on schools, on learning. How do we truly become the global best if we are not creating outstanding centers of learning? You mentioned Shekhar, good friend of mine. He's head of the FTII, and it's a great thing. I've had an opportunity to go there more than once, and I love going there. But today for India, for this opportunity to hit at 1 billion screens, for the number of amazing shows that we can create just for ourselves, and hopefully like Israel, like Turkey, create shows for the world, that requires several more FTIIs. It requires one FTII in every city of this country, if not more.
We come back to this, because I know Prahlad ji feels passionately about it too. It'll be great to hear his inputs on this, given that he's actually working on the skilling part of the journey of education. But if I can turn to you, Vani ji, for a rejoinder to what you originally said and what Gaurav has just mentioned, that you have, there's this whole data is oil, and you have so much value that you can extract from high quality data and high volume data as well. But if the fidelity of that data is not good, it can also create echo chambers, right? So you see this on social media all the time. And what you end up with is actually the lowest common denominator rather than segmented, differentiated, innovative content. So is there a role of industry leadership or business responsibility towards diversity still, which is very prominent even as digital moves along as the juggernaut it is? Or do you think market forces will resolve this in due course? If you can unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. We better not wait for market forces to resolve this, because let us be very clear, India is a very diverse country. And it's not just every 50 kilometers our food and our customs and our traditions change, our language changes. There are more than 365 dialects in the country which are spoken. And let me come to that big point of the macro meeting the micro. A show like Criminal Justice, and I want to address this to Gaurav, which is doing very well in big cities of the country, is also doing well in the B and the C centers of the country. But the eyeballs it is getting in a Meerut or in a Jhansi or in a Satara is going to be different in terms of its response time. So similarly, we do belong to the Hindi film industry and we belong to Hindi programming. And despite being a Hindi author's daughter, let me say the linguistic part of the diversity gets forgotten. But one good thing which has happened in the past couple of years with the advent of the OTT is the author is back. And when I say this, there are more and more book acquisitions which are happening. And I hope that the creative content segment, both the people who are streaming it, also the ones who are creating and producing it, will start paying attention to the gorgeous work which is happening in non-Hindi segments as far as literature is concerned. It's Marathi, it's Bangla, it's Odia, this gorgeous work happening down south. And somewhere, despite the fact that we don't get to hear so much about cinema which is non-Hindi sitting in a place like Mumbai or New Delhi, I mean, whenever there's a national award, we do hear that, some Telugu and some Tamil or some great Bengali film, got an award. Increasingly, the eyeballs for the linguistic diversity of India, which is the rich heritage we belong to, needs to be encapsulated. It's a big gaping hole right now. And a lot of OTT streaming services get away with saying, oh, we do so many acquisitions of films which are from other Indian languages. I'm not talking about what they are acquiring. I'm seriously talking about if we are to look at original content, we should really tap into the diverse, rich, cultural and linguistic, and so many, varied kind of resources which are available to us from other regions and other states. And I must also say, with Mandalorian, I want to say one thing. Stagecraft was also always a part of theatre. That's my first word. And it's gorgeous that today stagecraft can come into being. Imagine if you were to do Mahabharata with that same kind of technology, what kind of an explosive and an immersive experience it would be. So this is what I'm saying. If technology is giving us the leeway, if augmented reality and AI is happening to us every day, let's retell our epics. Let's retell our stories and help that technology to bring the same epics to a generation which probably does not have that much eyeball with what we were. When we were kids, we were, given as Dada, Dadi and Nana Nani ki kahaniyan. And I must also say, why are we waiting again for an Avatar to happen outside India? We are the original avatars. Avatars, absolutely head to toe. Let's reclaim that part of our great storytelling, that diversity. I'm again and again saying, when a Marathi film goes as an Oscar entry from India, it's a very good example of how Indian storytelling is so much appreciated and accepted elsewhere. How many more years will it take for us to come and embrace that reality? We don't need that bioscope coming from elsewhere. Let's reclaim our epics. Let's tell our stories the way we want to tell them. And technology is there to help us. Thank God that's happened.
Absolutely. And, while content industries are new and exciting and driven by new technology and innovation and so on and so forth, many of the production houses and businesses, large businesses and small businesses in content continue to be very old world in nature. They're very promoter led or led by people who've been around in the industry for a while. And how do therefore we look at Praladji, I'm aiming for you now. How do we bring younger creators to the fore, not just in various aspects of managing the production, etc., but actually running these shops, running these businesses, taking the risks to go local, to produce regional content and the linguistic diversity that Vaniji alluded to. That takes some real courage and risk-taking fervor. But as Gaurav was mentioning, this is also a function of our education system. Our lack of appetite to take risks, it transcends generations, and I don't see it changing from the top down. It will have to be a bottom-up sort of a revolution. And I know that you're doing a lot in this space. So your thoughts on how we should prepare for the future, given that it's very dangerous to rest on the laurels that we have in media and entertainment?
No, I agree completely because, my real claim to fame is not the work that I produced because that is now becoming dated. It's actually the people that I produced. It's the people that I created, the professionals that I created from my office. And they are today actually rule practically every field that they have entered in for two reasons. One is that the education that we gave them in the office was so practical and so radical in its form that the first God that we taught them about, which exists for everybody, but nobody believes in him to their peril, is Murphy. And Murphy strikes at you in the most amazing manner and never takes the same position twice. He makes the Kama Sutra look like kindergarten. So if you don't learn from Murphy and if you cannot anticipate Murphy, you can never be in an entrepreneurial business because you're constantly scared of failure. So in our country, culturally, we somehow the British and everybody has imbibed in us that if you fail, you are stigmatized immediately. You're not only stigmatized by your colleagues and your peers, but you're also stigmatized by your family. So the stress on failing is so huge that when kids fail at a very early age, they're suicidal. And that's so wrong. Because if you don't fail, how are you going to learn? Failure is an intrinsic part of learning, as long as you don't be stupid enough to keep repeating your mistakes again and again. So my curriculum for my college, which is called the Prahlad Kakkar School of Entrepreneurship and Branding, is really all about anticipation of Murphy, because you always have a plan B and a plan C. And the second part is that failure is a step to learning. It's a step to excellence. It is not a stigma. So if our kids don't fail 3 times at least in a year, they fail. And if they can't cope with that failure with a smile and say, next time I'm going to do it better, because that is what you have to actually encourage in them. So if the business of business is risk and creating content is all about risk, then how are you going to get content creators and directors who are not willing to take a risk but are willing to plagiarize everything that's in the past? So if plagiarism has to be ended because we stigmatize it, and original content has to be encouraged, then you have to encourage the fact that you have to take a risk. And if you're scared of failing, you will never take the risk. So most of our teachings on entrepreneurship are actually outside the class, on real hands-on experiences and not inside the class. And when we presented a curriculum to the UGC and said, can you recognize this as a forerunner of the kind of education that we need to have in this country? All these fuddy-duddy PhDs looked at me as if I was out of space. And they said, what are you talking about? If you don't put in so many hours, if you don't do so much, if you don't do this, if they don't sit for the exams, if you pass them without them sitting for the exams, how are you going to test them, etc., etc., etc. I said, every day is a test. Why should I have to sit for an exam at the end of the year? Every day they're being tested in the field. So why can't we understand that you don't need exams to promote somebody or to fail somebody? That should be in your own hands. Now, that is something that is completely beyond me. And so, in my opinion, the first thing that should be disbanded is the UGC. Because they are the biggest stumbling block to proper education in this country. We are still educating our kids like the British did to create tame civil servants who would follow the rules, who would be risk averse.
Prahlad, since we have very limited time now and we are being asked to wrap up, I want to take a last question to Gaurav and pick his brains on another thread in the report, Gaurav. And very quickly, your thoughts. The report mentions that there is a game called Fortnite, okay, that has over 350 million players, 350 million, so more than many countries in the world, who spent a total of 3.2 billion hours playing the game in April 2020 under COVID. And therefore, we have to increasingly think of our content products as platforms. This is an amalgamation of everything that has been said today, and that will, of course, also entail that we take large risks. But how do, what are the sorts of things that you think are enabling factors or disabling factors in this happening in the Indian context? And we'll end it with you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Vivaan. And yeah, I agree. I think I don't need to look at a data set because I have a 14-year-old son. So his engagement with games is incredible. Engagement with my stories is virtually zero. So I think this challenge stares at me every day when I wake up. So it's a big one, right? And I think it's a way in which worlds are truly coming together. When does a game start and a story end? Right? Is hard. And I think a lot of games are becoming great stories, and a lot of stories, of course, have led to brilliant games. So I think there is a massive opportunity here to get into immersive storytelling. India can and has the stories and has the technology muscle and the storytelling muscle to be able to really weave this in together. We're at the start of it. I expect us to see some really wonderful examples of this in the next 5 years. But let's continue to keep the focus on fundamentals. And I'll reiterate two things that I think both my fellow panelists have said again and again. It is about authorship. Let's never lose sight of that, number one. And number two, the purpose of education is to actually fundamentally only know how to ask the right questions and ask different questions. And I think as a society, we need to be committed to both. Have commitment to original ideas and authors who can inspire those, and an education system that propels thinking, innovation, and it comes from wanting to ask new and different questions. I think if we keep doing that, we're going to be continuing to be in a big and better place with lots more innovation in storytelling and technology, both happening together.
Thank you, Gaurav. We'll leave it at that, and thank you, other fellow co-panelists, Vani ji and Prahlad ji. Thank you for your time, and thank you for entertaining my questions today.
Thank you.